Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the offering. We are on the eve of training camp opening for the Buffalo Sabres. Very exciting times. The summer, unfortunately, for some, including myself, has flown by here. But the good news is on the other side of this, we have come to hockey season. There is a lot that I kind of want to I don't want to say quickly, but I want to get through here in these probably 20 minutes or maybe a little bit longer that will go, covering what to expect over the next week or two here in training camp for the Sabres. Because while the roster seems pretty much set, and I would agree with that sentiment that it's pretty much set on what they're going to do for their opening 23-man roster, I think there's some interesting storylines and there is some interesting camp battles here and there that could come through and be for some good discussion and things to follow throughout the next 2 or 3 weeks here, going to leading up to the opening game in Prague against the New Jersey Devils. So let's shift it back here. And before we get into Europe, because I do want to talk about Europe, because I think that adds some super fascinating dynamic to training camp itself is kind of a short window to make your roster decisions, but going to Europe this year only expedites that process. Is probably one of the reasons that the Sabres set themselves up to be locked into where they want to be with their roster pretty much that heading into camp. But let's kind of go through the things that I do want to cover here. And then a lot of these things I'm also going to be covering in my training camp preview, a little bit more in depth there, probably than I'll get into here. But nonetheless, it'll be a lot of the same things. So if you're looking for more in depth, definitely check that out tomorrow morning when it drops. All right, let's start with the first thing. And for me, it is the coaching staff and Lindy Ruff himself. So we're going to get a true idea of how Ruff sees some of these players. We're going to get a true idea of how he wants them to play. And we're going to get a true idea of how he's going to use his coaching staff. So this is, as a reminder, pretty much the same coaching staff that Don Granato had in place, with two exceptions. The one coach that was fired when Granato was let go as well. And then Seth Appert was promoted from head coach of the Rochester Amerks onto the Sabres bench in the NHL. A rare thing to see. A coach from outside the organization doesn't bring anybody with them from outside of the organization, but nonetheless, here we are, and that might have been part of the whole discussion. Anyways, what we're gonna see is what Ruff is gonna do with these guys. Who's he gonna have on the bench with him? Is Matt Ellis gonna go into that development role that we've heard more about, or is he gonna be on the bench and involved in some things? I guess we're gonna find out here. And then also, I think Seth Appert, what he's going to do is going to be really interesting. Not only from the perspective that, we've talked about this at points throughout the summer leading up to Lindy Ruff being hired, is, he could be the next coach in line here, and maybe getting some grooming, some experience under Lindy Ruff at the NHL level. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is the power play. So he was brought up. One of the reasons that or one of his responsibilities at least, and probably one of the reasons that he was brought up to the NHL, was to run the power play, a power play unit that struggled. I don't even know what the right word is, mightily last year. Arguably one of the worst power plays in the league with creativity and just overall finish itself. Appert's coming in, bringing what he did in the AHL, which had some success at times, and seeing if he can replicate that at the NHL level with the Sabres, because that power play needs to significantly improve. If it doesn't, then there's going to be all sorts of problems. There's really no chance for them to be any type of playoff competitor if they can't, at the very least, get a league average power play. If it's similar to what we saw last year, not only will it be frustrating and very confusing with the talent that they have, but it'll just be a downer on everything else. They'll really need to be a really effective team at 5-on-5 and a really good penalty killing team to overcome that if it is below average or doesn't improve significantly. But hopefully, Appert brings a new thought process, brings some new ideas to that unit, and then I think getting some players back like Jack Quinn might be able to help that. Bo Byram, if he's on the second unit, let's say with Owen Power, perhaps he can, bring some more comfortableness and some creativity from the blue line. But we'll see. That's part of this too. Is we'll see how Appert and Ruff stack up that power play unit over the next week or two here. That this team is together in North America at least. All right. The next thing on my list that I am very excited to see how it starts to play out as soon as tomorrow are the defense pairs. So there's been a lot of talk, a lot of articles written over the summer about the defense pairs, where Bo Byron fits. Henry Jokiharju really only working with Rasmus Dahlin. Is that where they want to put him, or they want to push him down the lineup? How is that going to look? How is that going to work? Matthias Samuelsson being healthy, is he going to go right back with Dahlin? Is he going to go into different roles? Maybe Owen Power that worked before, um, and then Owen Power itself. Where is he going to fit? Is there a possibility that he goes back with Dahlin? Something that worked at the end of last year. I'd hope not, but I wouldn't rule that out. It's really going to be interesting to see how Ruff sees a lot of these defensemen, what he thinks fits best for them, who he thinks, like I say, fit best with in his system. There's so many different ways that he can go with this. There really is. I think from an ideal standpoint that Byram should play with Dahlin, and then I guess you can go Matthias Samuelsson and Owen Power on the second pair. I guess that requires Power to play on the right side, which I guess he could. But then he leaves you two right shot defensemen of Clifton and Jokiharju on your third pair, and then is that what you want to do? Because it can either them really put the left side. It gets in the conundrum, right? It gets into the conundrum of how are you going to piece all of this together? What roles are you going to ask these players to play? That's going to be part of the conversation as well, and him trying to figure out exactly where he wants to put these guys. I don't know. There's not really a clean solution here, and it's one of the frustrating things I think. Just set aside Jokiharju's on ice performance hasn't been that great, but I think it's one of the frustrating things of just bringing him back and not another defenseman is that you're running the same group back that at times has struggled and not been able to find consistency, and you're just going to run it back again, and not bring in another defenseman that maybe could have solidified your top four. It could have made this easier to make these decisions and fit these pieces of the puzzle together a little bit more easier. So it's going to be fascinating. It really is. I would envision that he's probably going to rotate through a few pairs. So if he puts out together some pairings you don't like tomorrow in practice, I wouldn't lose your mind over it for sure. Especially on day one, he could just be testing some things out to see where things go. Um, Even from a line perspective, I totally expect that. So I'm not expecting what he puts together in terms of lines or pairs on day one of camp to really carry all the way through. Maybe by day 3 or 4 of camp, I could see that being the case, especially with how soon they need to leave and have their team together. But early on, I think there'd be some rotations, maybe in the first game or two, some different pairs together to see how they gel, how they fit in a system, and then make your final decisions before you get on the plane to go to Europe and put an NHL roster on the ice for 2 games over in Prague. It's really something. I don't know. I mean, there's probably not a lot more to say there, but it's something I look forward to now for um, weeks, months. Just when we realize that this is the defense pair they're bringing back, how this is all going to work out. Because there might be some, I don't want to say arguments, but some disagreements on viewpoints and pairs that are together. But I guess you gotta give it that opportunity to play out, early in the season. So the next thing that we'll be watching for, of course, is your camp battles. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 camp battles in particular to varying degrees of where what we'll be watching. The top one is the top 6 winger spot. So I think it really comes down to 2 players with maybe a third wild card. So you need to find somebody to step into that Jeff Skinner role. The obvious choice out of the gate is probably Jason Zucker. $5 million. They're paying him like a top 6 winger. It just makes sense. He can step in. He could do that. I'm not sure at age 32 if he has that ability anymore. I guess we could see. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the one they start with, and maybe this next player, pushes him out of that spot with how he's performs. But I think if I'm gonna make one guess on something that is a surprise, I don't even say it's a surprise. I don't think it really would be a surprise, but let's say it's a surprise or unexpected. I think it would be that Zach Benson, gets that opportunity first to play with Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn, if that is what the line would be. Um, I think it's a good fit from a skill set standpoint, and Benson can play that forechecking style if they need it. I think he has the skating ability to keep up with the other two. He can attack on the rush. He has the vision. Um, while he's only 19 years old, he does have that two-way game that can be helpful to those, to Cousins and Quinn if that's who he plays with. And then I think his passing. I think the passing part is what is most important here. So what I put in the article you could check out is, a lot of his offensive numbers in all three zones. Corey's tracking data, wasn't that impressive last year to be expected of an 18-year-old rookie. The one thing that stood out though was he was the best on the team and one of the best players in the league at his center lane passes. So that's basically getting the puck to the middle of the ice from wherever you are. That was something that he consistently did when you watched him in juniors, and then that is then translated now to the NHL. Uh, that is a very good skill set to have in this league. That is to be coveted, and that is to be given opportunity offensively to exploit. And I think if you're putting him with above average finisher like Jack Quinn, a player like Dylan Cousins who has shown above average finishing ability, that can only make those two more dynamic and can make it a more dangerous trio. Um, you know, there might not be a lot of size there if you go with Benson and Quinn. Cousins is a bigger player, not afraid to throw the body around, but his two wingers would be a little bit smaller. But I think you can make that work in the roles that they would be played in. I think that works. Then you can drop Zucker down to play with McLeod, and I don't know, whoever they put over there on the other wing, whether it be Greenway or Lafferty or whoever they put on the other wing. I think there's some real potential of that working out and making a lot of sense. I think I'm low key pulling for that. I think if that was to happen, it would excite me. There's certainly some reservations about relying on a 19-year-old in his second NHL season to step into that role, to be an effective player, to be an impact player, especially when you're a team that's trying to push for the playoffs. I almost certainly would like them to use some of that cap space they have to sign somebody else. Uh, but here we are. And this is the roster that they have. This is the roster they're bringing to camp. So, you know, making lemonade out of lemons, is that the statement? I probably butchered that. But, I think that's probably the best case scenario at this point if that unfolds because of Benson again putting together a strong training camp and showing that he can be an effective player in a top six role. Moving along, keeping with the forwards, if they decide to carry 14 forwards, if that's going to be something we'll have to see. They have 13 forwards pretty much locked in. If they carry a 14th, um, there's some debate and battle for that. I think Lucas Rusak is you know, the front runner for that because he's a 24-year-old AHL tweener that you can just sit in the press box and play him when you need to. He can play in a bottom six role. Isn't going to kill you. Isn't really going to help you. He's kind of just there, and you live with it. Isaac Rosane is another guy that could step into that. I think he has the skill set. I feel he does to play in a bottom six role if he needs to step in. They probably wouldn't love the idea of scratching him a lot out of the gate, but if you want to keep him around, if he earns it, if he plays well, then you can do that. Um, the third one in that discussion is Yuri Kulik. He's the one coming in off the prospect challenge with 5 goals in 3 games. That brings the momentum, that brings the juice here to steal a roster spot, if you will. The problem for Kulik that he's going to have here is he's not truly battling for a 14th forward spot. What he's battling is for a roster spot to knock somebody else out of the lineup. The Sabres are not going to keep him here as a 14th forward to sit in the press box and not play very much. In that case, they would just send him to the NHL or the AHL, excuse me. What he'll have to do to be on this team is to knock someone else out. He's likely going to have to take, I don't know, Jordan Greenway's roster spot. It's a tall task. It's a big ask for him to do in the limited runway he's going to have, but I also wouldn't say it's impossible. I think if he continues to build on that strong performance in the Prospects Challenge, that they will make the room for him. I guess basically is where I'm trying to go. They will make the spot for him, whether it be, I don't know, Greenway becomes your 14th forward then. And then Kulik starts in the NHL somewhere on the third line, let's say, and you're on your way. I think we'll get an idea of if they're giving Kulik a real opportunity is where he starts in training camp. If they're going to play him as a centerman because he's played center in the AHL and they want to develop him as a center, I don't think they're realistically considering him for this roster. If he plays on the wing with some NHL players or borderline NHL players at least, then I think they're giving him a realistic shot. And I think we're going to get that idea or get that answered right out of the gate here in the first day or two of practice. And for me, like I feel that he is ready for that opportunity. I just don't know if they're willing to give it to him right now. There's been a lot of, AHL coaches and other people saying that he needs to go down to the AHL, develop more, and dominate the league. Like I get it. I understand what they're saying, but really, I mean, this is a guy who's put up some better numbers historically as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old AHL player. I understand there was that scoring dip that he had at, coming out of the World Juniors last year, but still, he found the scoring again. He shows that he knows he has the shot, he has the ability. He has more than just that shooting game. He has the skating speed. He's good with the puck on his stick. I think he has, some good vision. I think there's some work that needs to be done there. I think he kind of at times gets tunnel vision with his speed and coming up the ice, but I think that can be developed. That can be worked on playing with better players and, getting more space depending on who you play with, um, in the offensive zone at the NHL level. So we'll see. I would say at this point, I would imagine he probably starts in the AHL. Well, I'll say I believe he probably goes with a 27-man roster to Prague or Europe at least. But I would say once they trim it down to 23 right now, I would say he probably starts in the AHL. But I'm ready for that not to be the case for sure. Moving to defensemen. So this sort of, I think, depends if they carry 7 or 8. If they carry 7, you're likely locked in with Jacob Bryson being your 7. If they carry 8, I guess then you get into a conversation with Dennis Gilbert and Ryan Johnson. Which one of those two can steal that spot? I would say probably Gilbert makes the most sense. Again, you really don't want to scratch Ryan Johnson. You just put him in the AHL, let him play top pair minutes and keep developing. And then if there's an injury, then you can get him up here. Kind of in the similar ilk of Kulik, I think for Ryan Johnson to earn a roster spot, he's going to have to beat out Bryson and Gilbert. And I just don't think there's the runway for him to do that. I don't think there's enough games. I don't think we'll get enough opportunity to do that before, they take their group and head off. So something worth watching, but I just think it's going to be Bryson most likely, especially if they carry 7, and then we'll see where things go from there. The last one is goaltender. So Devin Levi and James Reimer. They'll be competing in theory for the guy who will be the number 2 behind Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Levi is the front runner right now for sure. Barring poor performances in the preseason, I don't see why it wouldn't be him. I believe the plan is for Reimer to start in the AHL. Now, where that gets interesting, and there could be a wrinkle in that, is the waiver situation. So Reimer would need waivers to go down to the AHL, which I'm of the mind he probably clears. But if you have a few injuries and goaltending around the league throughout training camp, well, maybe it's not so easy. Like Vancouver is a team looking at right now with their situation. If Reimer hits waivers, would they consider it? Or I mean, they're trying to get Kevin Lankinen to sign with them, but I don't know. Maybe they would take Reimer and see how that goes. Maybe if things don't go well in Detroit to start the preseason, they might consider bringing Reimer back. I don't know, but there's situations out there. I think if I'm not mistaken, Winnipeg with Brossoit, he has an injury. Maybe that's again, it's waiver wire. They have somebody who comes in, fills in. Um, doesn't mean maybe the Sabres couldn't get him back down the road because maybe that team would then put him back on waivers. They don't need him anymore. The Sabres can claim him back. That's all a possibility, but I think it adds a little wrinkle in. We'll see how things go around the league. Like I said, sitting here today, if all things are equal and nothing really changes, I do think he clears. He's definitely one of the people that go to Europe because you're going to bring at least 3 goaltenders overseas with you just in case. Um, but yeah, I think that's something that we're gonna have to watch when decision time comes. But I would certainly put Levi, as the favorite for that right now. Okay, and last but not least, the thing that we've talked about a few times here that I've mentioned is Europe. So the situation of the team having to go to Europe really crunches down your timeline here. So preseason and camp is usually 2 to 3 weeks. That you have time to make some roster decisions for guys to make statements and maybe earn roster spots. Realistically, with camp opening tomorrow on Wednesday, since the Sabres are playing in Germany against Red Bull, JJ Paterka's old team from the DEL, they're playing on Friday in Germany. My anticipation, without knowing for sure, but logically, is they would leave no later than next Wednesday. So really, there's only a week before they have to make their final, essentially, decisions and bring what Kevin Adams said will be 27 players over to Europe with them. In that time, they play 3 preseason games this upcoming Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday. So 3 preseason games before, again, they likely, in my opinion, would head off to Europe. So there's a game or two, I guess you could say, for someone to make an impact or consideration. Of course, someone like Kulik, maybe if they have 2 good games in the preseason. You take him over to Europe. They have another good game against Red Bull. Maybe then you can consider he could really have an opportunity to make a name for himself or earn a spot. But other than that, I think that there would really have to be something special done by a player to unseat somebody that we all don't anticipate starting this season in the NHL. The runway just isn't there. It's a week. You have a week essentially, and I just don't think there's enough time. I think the team and the coaching staff will quickly start to lock in on their starting lineup and try to start to get lines and pairs and chemistry built. I mean, a lot of these players have played together. It's a roster that's been here for a couple of years now, but the bottom 6 for sure is a lot of new faces, new bodies, and again, a new system, a new head coach that people will have to learn. So, I think after the weekend, we're really going to see a focus shift to seeing, opening night lineup pairs, opening night lineup, even maybe a opening night lineup team that plays in North America before they head overseas for the one preseason game and then their regular season matchups over there. So a little bit different dynamic this year. It's hard enough for players to earn a spot in a short window in training camp. Not a lot of teams want to change what they're viewing based on a short window. But Zach Benson, for example, was able to do it last year. So, if you're somebody who's hoping for Kulik to steal a spot, you look for that performance from him. He's really can't afford to have a game where he doesn't stand out. I think if he has one of those games, then that's gonna be it for him. So yeah, camp opens tomorrow. Super excited. It's gonna be fun. A lot to talk about. Actual hockey games, hockey practices, hockey team. I look forward to it. I hope you come along for the ride this year, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.